Thank you everyone for your patience. I'll begin my opening remarks once more. So hello and welcome to the launch of Senator Moody's collaborative youth-centered report, a look into our thoughts, a collaborative initiative on the creation of a commissioner for Canada's children and youth. So my name is Jasmine. I'm a member of Senator Moody's office team and will be your MC for today. Before we open the event, there are a few housekeeping notes. This event has simultaneous interpretation in English and French. To use this feature, please click the interpretation button at the bottom of the Zoom call. If it's not visible, try clicking the three dots at the bottom of the screen, and it should pop up in your menu of options. We apologize in advance. As you saw, we have a few technical issues for today's call, so there may be an instance in which interpretation laxes for a few remarks here and there. We apologize in advance for this inconvenience. This event will be recorded. For those who do not wish to be included in this, please feel welcome to turn your cameras off. Otherwise, we highly encourage everyone to turn your cameras on so our presenters can see everyone in the audience. Please make sure to keep your microphones off unless you are called on to speak to prevent any sound feedback or technical issues. With that, I invite Senator Rosemary Moody to open the event.
And thank you, Jasmine. Welcome everyone to the launch of our youth-centered report. This report represents over a year of consultation with nearly 500 children and youth across Canada and their tireless dedication and commitment to evaluating the role of a federal commissioner for youth, children and youth. And it also represents how this office can be used to elevate and to highlight youth issues, voices, and vision for a more equitable, inclusive, and fair Canada. Before we begin this event, I recognize that we have many attending today on both unceded and territory across Turtle Island, the homeland of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. I also acknowledge that as a senator, I live, work, and play on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Today, I join you from the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat and the Seneca, Haudenosaunee, most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit Valley, which is covered under Treaty 13. A special thank you to the youth leaders, children, and youth advocates who will be speaking today. They and their peers have devoted much time, energy, and resources to the development of this report in collaboration with my office and our partners. And I'm delighted that they have been able to join us today to share their thoughts with you on this report. Back to you, Jasmine.
Thank you so much, Senator. I now invite the Honorable Landon Pearson to deliver remarks.
Thank you so much, Jasmine, and thanks all of you for organizing this. I am delighted to take part in this launch. I find that I cannot put my glasses on at the same time as my earphones, so I'm reading, but I may stumble a bit. So this is another hopeful step towards the goal which the Canadian Commission for the National Year of the Child set in our report for Canada's children over 40 years ago. It takes a long time for things to get going, in which we called for a responsibility center for children at the federal level of government. As a commission, we had noted that how much the circumstances in which children in Canada were growing up were affected either directly or indirectly by laws and policies that were developed at the federal level, and that and that we also noted that no one was actually in charge with paying attention to this aspect of children's lives, to the impact of children's lives on decisions that were being taken. So I can remember that Judge Ogilvie, Doris Ogilvie, who was the chair and I was the vice chair, we delivered our report to Prime Minister Trudeau, the father, and the government did respond in a positive way, but then nothing happened. So when I came to the Senate in 1994, after Canada had ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, I took up the charge along with a colleague from the House of Commons, but it to establish a human rights institution for children at the federal level, as called for by the Committee on the Rights of the Child in Geneva when it responds to Canada's reports on their ratification of the convention and their application or implementation of the convention. And then finally, the Senate, after I left the Senate, the report was issued from the Senate Standing Committee on Human Rights entitled Children, the Silent Citizens, which showed that nothing much had yet happened, but it started off the some successful, unsuccessful bills followed. So it's wonderful that Senator Moody has taken up the charge, and that this report, which is the result of extensive cross-country consultation with children, is the result. It's an excellent component. This report is an excellent component, which I hope will be, at long last, a successful undertaking. I see that all of you, I do hope, great interest as I have, and I would like to, but I would also like to add a couple of thoughts that over the last 40 years of thinking about this responsibility center have come to my mind. One of the questions I've been asking myself for some time, though, is do children really want someone else, a commissioner, to speak for them? Or would the commissioner as a door opener to the corridors of power? I'm increasingly convinced that children want to speak for themselves, not just to be consulted. And this is because they're real persons, experts in their own lives, no matter how young. And and they're also experts in the culture of their generation. And that culture is not the same culture that I grew up, or that many of the rest of you grew up in. So as I note, when I spend time with my granddaughters and grandsons, and now my great-grandchildren, the world has changed enormously and dramatically during my lifetime. And so the memories of and many of the challenges that children are facing now are new, especially those related to climate change and to the digital universe. Children need partnership rather than direction, and we need them, I think, even more than they need us. The truth of the matter, the real truth of the matter, is that we need each other if there is to be us all. Because, as the children said at the United Nations General Assembly Special Session on Children 20 years ago, a world fit for us is a world fit for everyone. So congratulations to Senator Moody for initiating this process and championing it, and congratulations to all who took part. And let me urge all of you to read the report. Thank you.
Warm thank you to the Honorable Landon Pearson. And next, I'm happy to pass the mic to Simi Sahota and Megan Jacques, who will be speaking on behalf of the hundreds of youth participants who have developed this report. Simi Sahota is a member of Children's First Canada's Young Canadians Parliament and Youth Advisory Council, and Megan Jacques is the chair of Children's First Canada's Youth Advisory Council. Over to both of you.
So, hello everyone. As it was said before, I'm Simi Sahota. I'm a 17-year-old high school student from Surrey, BC, and it's truly an honor to be here and have the opportunity to be a part of something so large and significant and have the chance to speak with you. This bill, an act to establish the Office of the Commissioner for Children and Youth in Canada, is a little bit of a mouthful, but is truly a beacon of hope in troubling times. Helping to build and create this report has only furthered my optimism in seeing a better and brighter future of Canada. I got involved with this report as both a facilitator and a youth advisor back in April of 2021, a year ago from now, and I have to say the progress has been incredible. At first, I was new to this whole thing, and I remember being so nervous prior to my first time facilitating an engagement session. I remember my hands getting sweaty as I was logging onto the Zoom call and stumbling over my words a couple of times, like I sure I am now, but I survived. Now, for those who don't know what these engagement sessions are, many youth, including myself, had a chance to facilitate groups of diverse children, youth, and adults across the country to gather information as to what they thought about establishing a children's commissioner. I did this for a couple of months where I met so many incredible youth who were vocal and had many unique ideas that I would have never thought of in a million years. I had the opportunity to witness firsthand the brilliance of so many youth nationally. The one thing I never came across in all the numerous sessions I hosted was someone who did not think the commissioner was necessary or vital. Across Canada, it was clear that youth felt that a child commissioner would be beneficial. At the end of the months of these engagement sessions, we switched gears and I changed roles from a facilitator to a youth advisor. All the data was collected and it was time to start fleshing out the report. I remember seeing all the info that was collected into the draft report, and even though it was unfinished, it finally felt like our voices were being taken seriously. Even in the final report, we get to see so many direct quotes from youth, which further emphasize how much Senator Moody truly cares about youth voices being heard. Now, this has not been the first attempt to establish a commissioner for children and youth, but I'm hoping it'll be the successful last. The current state of children and youth are struggling in Canada. In the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, we need support now more than ever. Those steps have been taken to help many Canadians. Children need specific, focused, and direct help in order to make a meaningful change in the right direction. This is why the time for a commissioner is in the present. I frankly believe that the future of a better Canada relies on it. As a country who prides itself on its rights, freedoms, and quality of life, it is essential that we build conditions where children and youth are not only safe and healthy, but rather thrive and prosper. Canada is a leading country on the global stage, yet children have been left behind constantly for numerous years. This is why the report is something I'm so passionate about, as I'm sure you can all tell. I cannot stress enough that the urgent action, awareness, and change is necessary. I would like to just thank all of you for being here at the launch. It is incredible to see so many people dedicated to the children of Canada, and it gives me so much hope. I would also like to thank the amazing staff who helped the process and myself along the way. They are the hidden gems which made this report possible. And of course, I'd like to give thanks to the Honorable Senator Moody for being a champion for children's rights. And lastly, I would love if we could all acknowledge the countless youth who put their hours in to create such an amazing and impactful report, which will affect future generations to come. Youth are the leaders of today and tomorrow. Thank you.
As you may know, children in Canada make up nearly 1/4 of the population. That's pretty enormous when we think about it. However, Canada doesn't even have like an office to promote, monitor, and investigate children's rights. Hence, it is kind of one of the few countries in the industrialized world that lacks an independent mechanism to monitor the rights and well-being of its children and to promote their best interests and law and policies. Over the past decade, a little bit like Simi was saying, Canada has steadily fallen from global rankings when it comes to the global well-being of children. One fact that is really concerning is actually the terrifying suicide rates, which is a direct reflection of how you truly feel right now in Canada. Although it may take time for this bill to pass through Parliament, it would be an amazing first step for Canada and a true symbol of hope. Hope for me, hope for my friends, hope for all the little ones I frequent. As a youth who has the chance to speak with the higher ups and to represent my peers, I know that finally having a seat at the table would make a huge difference. And not only because of the results, but also because of the journey. It is a way for all to invest in us, yourselves, and the future generations. Ultimately, it'll really be up to the government to ensure that this children's commission doesn't just exist on paper. Rather, it will need to be properly funded and supported by the government to carry out their mandates. What youth want is a commissioner that will hold the government accountable for their actions and have the power to speak against Parliament if deadlines are not met and if agreements are not followed through with. But most importantly, we really want someone who will just open a dialogue with us. I also hope that this commissioner will be able to raise awareness among the public, among politicians, to raise awareness that they too were once children that needed to feel loved, valued, and respected just like everyone else. I hope that this commissioner will have the power to make real change for children for the better and for the long run. As my peers all across Canada have said, it's very important that the Commissioner Office would amplify the voice of youth and not speak over us. For this, the making of this report has been exemplary. We've been really heard, and I'm thankful for that. We've been able to do as the Commissioner should and represent diverse youth rather than just one individual idea of youth. To the government, well, I hope you're listening, because I hope this country finally realized that we need something like this and turn this bill into a law, not only because it will finally be a solid foundation for protecting children, but also because it will help children who are currently in need. We need action, and this is a very promising beginning. As youth, we deserve better than to be forgotten. We deserve better than to be ignored. We are not lost. We are right here with you in the same room, and we are loud, we are young, we are strong. We are part of why this report could even be launched. It's really time for all the pieces to come together. This country, this parliament, its members, parents, and us youth. Thank you for taking time to listen to youth voices.
Thank you so much to both of our young leaders for these powerful remarks. We'll now move to the presentation section of this event, where I invite co-authors Dr. Daniela Bendo and Josh Dadjo to take us through the high points of the final report.
Hello, everyone. Just waiting for a nod. Okay. So, just want to start by saying that I'm not very pleased to have to follow up those two wonderful speakers. So, we will do our best. Bonjour à tous et à toutes.
Hello to everyone. We're very grateful for everyone who has taken the time to be here today. And we would like to be able to thank you again for taking the time. And this afternoon I'll be speaking in English, but we do have interpretation.
She's Parliamentary Affairs Advisor, and I have the pleasure of being with Professor Bendo for the next few minutes to walk us through this report and its key takeaways. Before I go into the presentation, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge in this forum the pivotal role that Professor Bendo has played in getting us to this day. In addition to being the lead author and really a leader in conceptualizing the report itself, she played an important role in drafting the original bill. And in all the conversations that I've had the pleasure of having with her in the past years, the focus was always about raising the voices of young people, centering our work on their needs and keeping them front of mind. So Daniela, thank you so much. Let's go to the next slide. Great. Before we go any further, I want us to be on the same page about what we're talking about when we say the word commissioner. And you would have probably gotten a general sense at this point, having heard the wonderful speakers that have preceded me. But when we use the term Commissioner for Children and Youth, or another way of saying it is a federal advocate, or the term Responsibility Center, we're talking about an independent federal officer of Parliament that would have three core functions: accountability, advocacy, and dialogue. What's accountability look like? It's about scrutinizing federal policies, legislation, regulation, and so on, to consider how these affect children and youth, and to consider how to make these policies more responding to the needs of children and youth. Advocacy is about raising issues that are important that children and youth are dealing with. That children and youth are facing or dealing with on the day-to-day, especially when they may not be priorities for federal legislators, or oftentimes are just not something federal legislators are aware of. A dialogue is about engaging directly with children and youth where they are and providing a platform for them to engage directly with parliamentarians. Go to the next slide. So how did we get there? Well, the work on Bill S210, and sorry, how did we get here? How did we get to this day specifically? The work on Bill S210 started in the spring of 2019, and after a year of engagements, discussions, research, drafting, Bill S-217, as it was at the time, was tabled in June of 2020 by Senator Moody and then retabled in the fall of 2020 after prorogation. After having placed a stake in the ground and renewed debate and interest in the idea of a commissioner, it was clear that the next step was a broad engagement campaign with children and youth throughout Canada. So we joined with wonderful organizations and individuals, the ones including many of those listed here, to create a collective that would work together to hear the voices of young people. Together, we designed and organized workshops with organizations throughout Canada. We had 35 workshops with a total of 402 young people, and another 89 participated through online surveys. And then a report was drafted, and as Megan and Simi mentioned earlier, a roundtable of young people participated in drafting the report and had an active say in what it should look like, what should be involved in it, and what should be the key components of it. In other words, they were really central in conceptualizing the report. And so I'll stop here and I'll pass the floor to Professor Bendo.
Great. Thank you so much, Josh, and thank you to Senator Moody's office. I'm really honored to be here today. What I'm going to start to talk about here is a little bit about the methodology. So Brittany, if you want to move to the next slide, that'd be great. Before I do that, I do want to say hi to Alexandra and thank Alexandra for all of her hard work in making the initiative and the project come together. I know there was countless hours that kind of went into the recruitment, which was a lot of hard work. So I'm going to just shed some light on the methodology just to give you an idea of the design of the overall project. So I think it's important to note that there is kind of limited literature, both academic but also empirical literature that has actually focused on children's commissioners internationally. And especially there's kind of no literature that has really focused on a Canadian children's commissioner from the actual viewpoint of young people themselves. And so I do think that this project fills a really important gap. And so our methodology in this report was actually developed in a way that focused on young people's viewpoints and perspectives. So it took a collaborative approach with young people to really understand what was actually important to them. And Josh had mentioned this, but we did have 35 engagement sessions across Canada with 400 young people. And so in order to really carry out these engagement sessions, it was really important for us to engage with young people from various organizations who are also trained facilitators, as Simi had mentioned, and they really helped to carry out these sessions with other children and young people. So once we had the opportunity to really gather all this data and to analyze it, we really wanted to re-engage with young people through the roundtable engagement sessions, which were a really important step in the methodology to ask young people things like if the findings were actually accurate, to ask them if they had any additional insights that they wanted to add, and to really discuss with them what they wanted the actual report to look like and what they wanted to include in the report. So when you have the chance to read the report, you'll see that these insights are definitely central to the design of the outcome and the outcome of the report. But in addition to the engagement sessions, Josh had mentioned this, but we also supplemented our data with a survey. And this was for young people who either couldn't participate in the engagement sessions or who felt more comfortable showcasing their viewpoints through the survey. And so our study is therefore considered a mixed method approach, but we really prioritize the qualitative focus of the project. And so in the report, you will see very specific findings that stem from the survey. So the survey asked things like if there should be a children's commissioner, and overwhelmingly from young people, the answer was yes. We asked things like if the commissioner should focus on either individual or systemic issues, what role the commissioner should play, who should appoint the commissioner, things like what age range should the commissioner kind of represent. And so you'll see some of those findings in the report. But for the purpose of today, I'm actually going to focus on the broader qualitative themes that young people shared with us. So Brittany, if you want to head to the next slide, this here is kind of an overview of the 4 main qualitative themes that ultimately emerged in our findings. So I'd like to unpack each of these just briefly with you today. You can head to the next slide there. The first theme was really kind of one of the most apparent themes. And this really emerged in our discussions with young people. And it was about the importance of listening to and valuing young people's viewpoints, their perspectives, their experiences, and ultimately their voices. So young people explained that this should really be the primary focus of a children's commissioner and of the office. The participants highlighted the importance of really having someone at the federal level to represent young people's lived realities, their proposed solutions, their recommendations, and ultimately their suggestions on how to enhance service delivery systems, how to enhance policies and legislation, as well as practices, and to really advocate for change concerning issues that actually impact their day-to-day lives. So they explained that their viewpoints and their kind of perspectives and their lived experiences are oftentimes overlooked or silenced in systems that serve them. And so as a result, all of the participants made it really clear that listening to their voices directly should really be the key objective of the commissioner and the commissioner's office. Young people also distinguish the difference between this idea of one universalized voice for children and youth, as well as tokenistic approaches to representing their voices, and the importance of really understanding this idea that young people's voices are diversified, and there is a real importance of engaging with young people in authentic ways that actually respond to their suggestions. And so that was some of the kind of insight that young people shared with us when we unpacked this theme. And this really includes kind of providing spaces for young people to help us develop main areas to focus on. So asking them, from their point of view, what is important for us to prioritize. It also includes collaborating with them to understand what questions are actually important to them, and also how we can learn with and from them to inform our own practices in a way that will accurately reflect their lived realities. So that was kind of the focus for theme 1. You can go to the next slide, Brittany. The next theme is definitely in line with theme 1. And so in our discussions with young people, it was quite evident that children and young people really prioritize the importance of having a commissioner who could really focus on protecting, promoting, and implementing children's rights in practice. And so many of the participants highlighted that there is no one at the federal level in Canada that is advocating for the protection, promotion, and implementation of children's rights. And so as a result, many of the participants expressed concern over the fact that children's rights are not being protected in different service delivery systems. So some of the examples that young people spoke to us about were the youth justice system, the child welfare system, in healthcare contexts, and in education. They also highlighted the fact that children's rights are not being promoted or taught to young people. And we know this from experience. We know that young people aren't being taught about their rights. And as a result, their rights aren't being implemented in practice. And so from the viewpoint of young people, this was kind of focusing on things like in legislation and in policies that pertain to children and youth. And so ultimately, young people suggested that the commissioner's office should really have a role to play in protecting young people's rights on behalf of children and young people, but also the role should focus on partnering with young people to help them advocate for their own rights through self-advocacy. And one thing that we know about rights is that they are relational, as the Honorable Landon Pearson would say. And so, the idea here was that if young people really don't know about their rights, then they may not be aware of their responsibilities. And so what we learned from young people is that rights can build community. And when we build awareness of rights, we are building citizens and really reinforcing the idea that rights are linked to citizenship. And so children's rights should really therefore be enforced by the commissioner and by children themselves to ensure their protection, their provision, and their participation rights are respected and implemented. And so those were the kind of main viewpoints that we heard from young people on this area. So Brittany, you can move to the next slide. This is the third theme that came out of the project here. And so throughout the sessions with young people, the participants continuously mentioned to us the role that a commissioner could play in representing children in Parliament. So for instance, some children explained that it would be important for a commissioner to present different child-related issues to Parliament and inform government officials about rights-based issues that require attention. Other participants highlighted the potential role of a commissioner in providing platforms for young people to express their ideas and recommendations directly to Parliament. So this could include planning events or providing pathways so that young people can visit Parliament to present their ideas, their suggestions, and their lived experiences to government officials. Some of the participants also explained that the office could focus on providing solutions and recommendations to Parliament and advocating for change at the parliamentary level to address things like systemic issues that impact young people's lives. Some of the other participants also noted that the commissioner could play a central role in really developing, revising, and enhancing policies and legislation to better serve children and youth. Young people also suggested that the office could assume an accountability and a monitoring role to ensure that children's issues are prioritized and addressed in Parliament. So ultimately, these young people really expressed concern over ensuring the fact that the commissioner does not deviate away from engaging with children and young people directly. So that was something that was extremely important to young people. And so what this finding suggests is that valuing young people's voices and viewpoints and taking a rights-based approach to working with children and youth is a potential pathway for a commissioner to create and represent children at the parliamentary level. All right, Brittany, if you can head to the next slide. This is just the last theme here. And this was really all about cultivating a culture of change. So collectively, children and young people really focused on different ideas about what they would like to see change, as well as what a commissioner could do to help better the lives of Canadian young people. So for example, some of the participants placed emphasis on the importance of having a commissioner and an office that could advocate for policy changes that would be relevant to children and young people. And they also explained that the office could focus primarily on systemic issues that impact young people and strive to advocate for systemic change across Canada, in particular at the federal level. So a lot of participants also proposed that the commissioner should focus on advocating for young people in challenging circumstances and with young people from a range of different social lines of difference. The young people also referred to the fact that change is important to them and that there is space and an opportunity for young people to work directly with a commissioner to cultivate change at both the individual and the systemic level and in a range of different ways. So just kind of reflecting on the previous findings, it's quite clear that creating a culture where children's voices are valued and heard and acknowledging and implementing a rights-based approach to working with young people and partnering with them to represent their views in Parliament, that there really is potential for a commissioner to create change that will be impactful to Canadian young people, and especially those young people who are facing challenging circumstances. So these are really kind of just a brief snapshot of the broader findings that stemmed from the young people who participated in the project. And I know many of you are here today. So thank you so much for your informed perspectives. But in addition, just the last thing I will say is, there's a range of outcomes that really do stem from this report. So Brittany, if you want to head to the next slide, what the report kind of sheds light on is the need for a focal point for children and young people in Canada. And it also sheds light on the important role that parliamentarians can play in making this a reality, and also recognizing that this project and this initiative in general are ultimately a form of citizenship engagement. And so this really was a citizenship exercise with young people who want their voices and their formed perspectives to be listened to and heard. So again, just as a brief snapshot, more details are outlined in the report, but I will pass it back to Josh to talk about next steps.
Thank you. So going to the next slide. Here we go. So what's next? Well, the work is not done. There's a need to continue working towards a federal advocate for Canada's children and youth. We also need to work towards creating focal points for the voices of children and youth in Ottawa and finding ways to ensure that federal legislation, regulations, and any other policy are designed with children in mind. We have been employing an intersectional lens to take special care to understand individual and collective context, histories, and needs of children and youth, and this must continue to be our approach going forward. And lastly, we see the need for continued collaboration. We brought together young people, stakeholders, leaders, academics, and many others to do this work. And the outcome of this collaboration, this report, and the historic opportunity to lend our voice to nearly 500 young people, it reminds us that youth benefit if we work together, and they want to be part of that process. And so we look forward to continuing this work. And with that, I'll hand it back to Jasmine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniela Bendo and Josh Dajo. Before we proceed into our next remarks, I have a small note that we will have a moderated Q&A period after our next set of speakers. So feel welcome to start adding your questions into the chat. And when we move into that portion, we'll be happy to raise as many as we can in the short period of our event. So with that, I will pass the mic over to Terrence Hamilton, Policy Specialist for UNICEF Canada, for his remarks.
Yeah. Hello, thank you. And good afternoon to Senator Moody and the other honorable parliamentarians and their staff who are joining us today for this important conversation. We're very lucky here in Canada to have parliamentarians, especially Senator Moody and her colleagues in the Senate and Senator Pearson before them, who continue to make time and space for these conversations about the rights and interests of children in Canada. What we don't have in Canada, of course, unfortunately, is the governance infrastructure, including a children's commissioner, that would make the rights of children a reality in every aspect of daily lives. As many of you know, Canada played a leading role in the development of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child through the late 1980s. But I was born in the late 1980s, and as you can probably tell, some of my hair is quickly turning gray, although whether that's the result of advocating for the rights of children or having a child of my own for the first time remains unclear. But needless to say, the time has come for Canada to take implementation of the convention seriously. Next month, as was mentioned, Canada will appear before the UN committee responsible for reviewing implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And unfortunately, we can already anticipate what many of their observations are going to say, because most of the recommendations that were included in Canada's last review in 2012, including the need for a children's commissioner, remain to be implemented. Over 30 years after Canada ratified the convention, it's time to properly incorporate the rights of children into our democratic system. That means providing meaningful mechanisms for young people to be heard on the issues that affect them, addressing systemic discrimination and its resulting inequities, and establishing a children's commissioner at the federal level. Child rights governance isn't just a nice to have either. A couple of commentators have already mentioned Canada's poor performance in the UNICEF report card series on child and youth well-being, where in the most recent edition, Canada ranked 30th out of 38 high-income countries on child and youth well-being. Of course, there are a lot of reasons for that disappointing ranking, but one thing that we can see in those international comparisons is that jurisdictions that have properly and thoroughly implemented the convention get better results across all areas of child and youth well-being. So it's important to remember what's at stake in these conversations. I'm also glad that Dr. Bendo mentioned that this engagement was a citizenship exercise for the children and youth who are involved. Children and young people, of course, children and young people under the age of 18 are citizens who don't get to vote. The efforts of Senator McFedrin and other advocates notwithstanding, of course. But in a representative democracy like Canada, that means that their rights and interests require special consideration and their voices require a venue. And a children's commissioner would certainly be a huge step in that direction. And as this engagement has shown, children and young people themselves do know what's at stake. They understand the issue, what the issues are, and they will demand accountability. So on behalf of UNICEF Canada, thank you once again to Senator Moody and her outstanding staff for their tireless efforts in this engagement and the resulting report, to Dr. Daniela Bendo, Cheyenne Radham, Erwin Ellman, Kelsey Beeson, Children First Canada, and the Laidlaw Foundation, and Simi and the Honorable Lind and Pearson for their remarks, and most importantly, of course, to the many children across the country who contributed to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrence. Next, we have Cheyenne Ratnam, co-founder and CEO of Ontario Children's Advancement Coalition, for her remarks.
Bonjour, hello, and vanakkam, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Jasmine. I am the co-founder and CEO of the Ontario Children's Advancement Coalition. I am joining you from Treaty 13 to Toronto, and I'm very humbled to share the space with fellow phenomenal partners. And a big thank you to Senator Rosemary Moody and her staff for taking a lead role in supporting with the amplification of young Canadian people. For those who do not know much about the Ontario Children's Advancement Coalition, or the OCAC, we are dedicated to ensuring young people and lived expert voices are amplified and centered, where young people live in safe and nurturing environments and where they are active participants in their lives and social change. As a person who herself came as a child refugee to Canada, who experienced youth homelessness, who grew up in the child welfare system, and who has interconnected identities at the axes of oppression and marginalization, and as a person who grew up with peers from populations who are further away from equity, opportunity, and rights, I know firsthand the importance of amplifying marginalized and subjugated voices for not only key decisions, but all decisions that are interconnected with them. The OCAC prioritizes the amplification of young people and first voice advocates, especially people furthest away from equitable and adequate resources and supports. And it has been a great journey with this team to support with the leadership, planning, recruitment, and amplification of our children and youth in Canada. I want to also give a shout out for another process that occurred independently, led by Indigenous young people, A7G, which engaged with and amplified Indigenous young people. The report produced is also an important read. For me today, and this report is about the voices of young people, our children's voices who come from all walks of life, including varying statuses in this country, are very important in the development of policies, regulations, legislations, guidelines, and every level of moving toward change. In this case, to explore thoughts on a commissioner for children and youth in Canada. This decision cannot be made without children and young people and must be guided by them in order to understand the differential needs and gaps and interests regarding a commissioner. Advocating for, protecting, and supporting the successful outcomes and healing of young people, especially from at potential, however, systemically disadvantaged populations, is important. I am very proud of this partnership with Senator Moody and her amazing team, the Elman, Laidlaw Foundation, UNICEF Canada, Children's First Canada, and of course, Dr. Daniela Bendo, who supported with the report. And of course, thank you to all the young people who collaborated and led us into their minds and hearts, who participated in engagements, and the organizations who supported with the recruitment and engagement of young people. Thank you to everyone who is here today to support the launch of this important report. Do not let young people's voices in the report go unheard. Open the document and read it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheyenne. I now pass along the mic to Erwin Elman, Fellow and Special Advisor to Laidlaw Foundation, for his remarks.
Thank you. You'd think I'd know how to unmute myself by now after 2 years of the pandemic, but old dogs, new tricks. So I know the translators didn't have that. I'm going to go off script so I can be short. Thank you to Senator Moody for creating this space. And you know what nobody said yet was having the courage to put forward the bill, which was hard. I watched the debates in the Senate, and it was hard, and it took courage to do that. So the senator, I'm guessing, knows the courage it took for the young people that Terrence and Cheyenne and Kelsey and Josh and Alex brought together. And that it took courage for those young people to speak up at countless meetings across the country, because we intentionally asked young people who were the most marginalized from their rights. We asked people in care. We asked racialized people. We asked Indigenous people, and Cheyenne said, and through Assembly for Seven Generations, they created their own report. And it's really courageous for them to name the world, because it takes hope, right? They gave us their story. And in that report, at least somewhat, Dr. Bendo captured some of the stories that they gave us in great courage. And I'm thinking of Thomas King, and I'm going to end with that, so I'm almost done. I'm thinking of Thomas King. And he wrote this book of stories. And he talked about you can do what you want with the stories. This includes now Senator Moody, but all of legislators here. or will see this recording or read that report. You can do what you want with the stories these courageous young people who named the world, tried to influence the world, gave you. You can make a bill. You can write an article. You can put it on your CV and say, look what I did. We did a report. You can do what you want as legislators with this story. But you cannot live your life again as if you've never heard it. You've heard it now. So I ask you, as soon as you close this Zoom link, you decide, what are you going to do? Because now those young people entrusted you with your story, and I would ask you to guard those stories with care, to honor them, respect them, and do something with them. Now, 40 years they've been telling their stories, and now you have it right from them. What are you going to do? I'll leave it at that.
Warm thanks to Erwin and the rest of our presenters for today. Given the short time period we have left, we'll try as best as we can to move into our Q&A period with Senator Moody, the Honorable Landon Pearson, Dr. Daniela Bendo, and Josh Dadjo. I see we have some questions already in the chat, so we will go through those and see how many we can get through. So first, we have a question. I think it might be directed more towards Senator Moody and perhaps Dr. Bendo. The first question is, while this advocacy work continues with great hope on the success of this bill, is there now a core group of children and youth that could respond to other work bills in the Senate, House of Commons that are ongoing at the same time?
So I can start. And I thank everyone who participated in this very important study. We did pull together people through connections, through organizations, and so there is potentially a network that could be formalized for the future, I would think. But right now, it is not a formalized network. But we certainly have access to the individual groups and their young people who they helped give us access to and allowed us, facilitated our connection with them. And we would like to continue to have these dialogues with them over time, especially as we move forward to reconsidering what the next bill looks like.
Thank you, Senator. Danielle, if you had anything to add on to that, I will also put another question onto your plate in the chat so we can do 2 for 1. Can you tell us if First Nations, Métis, and Inuit youth, like the AFN National Youth Council, has participated in the consultation process and to the dialogue?
Thank you. Yeah, I think just to also build off Senator Moody's comment, I know this is something that Josh and I have been thinking about, and we do think it's really important, right? Because we've talked a lot in this report about authentic participation, and I think accountability and holding ourselves accountable to young people and to their viewpoints. So I know that that's kind of also part of the next steps that Josh had kind of talked a little bit about. So that's that piece. The other piece is in terms of, if you take a look at the report, you can kind of get a breakdown of every organization that participated. So you can take a look in the report. And so the answer would be yes, but what you can also look at is the kind of visual. It'll break down the different provinces and territories as well, where we kind of yielded participation. I know Josh might be able to speak a little more specifically about that element, but generally speaking, we have a lot of that outlined in the report in a lot of detail, I would say.
Yeah, I can add that. I'll wait for the camera to come to me. Great. It was mentioned, the A7G report was mentioned. It was a parallel process that was run a few months before, right before we had begun. And so because of the, we felt that, in terms of, sorry, let me start over there. Those communities went ahead and proceeded on their own, and we have that report and we read that report. We've read that report, and I would encourage you, Kelsey, one of our collaborators, shared the link in the chat, so please check that out. And as Daniela said, we included, we had many groups of young people, and those groups were diverse. So there were Indigenous young people from various urban, rural settings, and we also had we did a lot of work to make sure various groups were well represented. So we made sure to spend time with young people who are recent immigrants. We tried our best to do linguistic diversity as well. Regional diversity was, of course, very key. And so, yes, that was definitely a part of the conceptual work for this project.
Thank you. So we'll finish off with the last question here before we proceed to conclude the event. So this last question, I would say Dr. Daniela Bendo, if you'd like to answer, as well as Senator Moody and Josh, if you want to add in, or the Honorable Landon Pearson. So this is, I'm wondering how youth can get and stay involved going forward.
Yeah, I think I can kind of chime in here. Again, this is something that we talked about in our last meeting actually on Friday in terms of next steps. So I think as a team, there's been a lot of effort in terms of conceptualizing this. I think as a team now, it's our responsibility to come together and determine what that might look like, and to collaborate with young people to ask them what they actually think about next steps and what they might like to see. So I know that's definitely on our agenda, but others can definitely chime in as well.
Senator Pearson, I know you'd like to talk about it. Tell us what your thoughts on this.
Well, I'm anxious because I'm involved now setting off a process related to my center at Carleton to look at the special session on children that took place 20 years ago. This is the anniversary, May the 10th, when they issued a World Fit for Children, and we signed on to it, and we developed a Canada Fit for Children. But at the same time, there was a youth component that they brought their own statement, which they called a World Fit for Us. And so our project now is to get as many young people as possible, hopefully some of those that you've already connected with and other kinds of ways to us and look at what does the world, because the issues that the young people addressed 20 years ago are not the same. We're now looking at issues around climate that were hardly addressed at the time. We're looking at issues around pandemics, ongoing pandemics in health that were not, then it was the issue of HIV/AIDS, now it's different. And we're looking at issues, the impact on personal lives of the digital universe, which is huge and which was not. So we're very anxious for young people to say, what would a world fit for children, a world fit for us, look like? And what then add this to the recommendations they've already made. It's a broad subject, but because there's so many things that keep coming up, but it's so important because, without them, and particularly as I look at my great-grandchildren, I want a world fit for them there. They need a world fit for them.
Thank you. I saw that, Megan, you had your hand raised. If you had anything to add to a response to the question, I invite you to take the floor as well.
Thank you, Jasmine. I actually just want to touch upon the kind of network of you that would work on different issues and bills at the same time, because at Children's First, what we really pride ourselves with is actually that we're in the alliance of all of these different youth organizations, and we try to bring in children from all over Canada. So the Young Canadians Parliament is actually a way that anybody, whether it's a senator, a minister, or even a member of parliament, could connect directly with children. It was actually what brought me to that movement at first, because it was one of the first and only places where we can really sit at the same table and have a direct discussion. So although we don't work on every subject, we can't, but we're actually trying to work on many. And we've had Senator Moody that came in that helped us with exactly the YCP. We've had Senator McFedrin as well. So thank you to all of you. And I really think that this is something that people can keep in mind of. The YCP is ready to help and we're there.
Apologies, everyone. You think I would know how to unmute by now. So thank you. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, everyone, for your responses. And thank you all who have asked questions in the chat, as well as your well remarks in there. As we're approaching the close, I hand it off to Senator Moody to close the event.
Thank you, Jasmine. And as we close the event, I have to say that I am filled with gratitude for all of you who joined us today for the launch of this report, and to all of you who have devoted the past year to this consultation process. As a pediatrician, children and youth have been the center of my work and focus for many decades. And when I was appointed to the Senate in 2018, I carried this focus with me. And I have continued to work to amplify children's voices and experiences here in the Senate. All of us who work on these issues faced by our children and youth, it is becoming increasingly clear to all of us that children do not enjoy the full rights and privileges of Canadian society. Their needs, voices, and realities are often left out of the public dialogue, systems, and institutions. Colleagues, I have represented these facts time and time again in the community, in Parliament, at events, and several times you'll see this recurring theme throughout this report. Canada is falling behind in protecting the rights and well-being of our children and youth, not just as a nation, but within the global community. Campaign 2000's 2021 National Report Card statistics indicate that child poverty is a pervasive issue in every jurisdiction of Canada. And this is exacerbated by the stalling of poverty reduction measures in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. In 2019, nearly 1 in 5 children lived below the poverty line. And at the current pace of progress, it would take 54 years to eradicate child poverty here in Canada. And this burden of child poverty is felt most strongly in Indigenous and Northern and rural communities. These are some of the many examples of how we are failing to bring the needs and rights of our children into our decision-making, into our legislation, and into our democracy. A federal commissioner for children and youth is an essential step forward in advancing substantive and tangible change for young people in Canada. And this is a role that young Canadians have told us that they want to see realized in our federal institutions and in our systems. The young people who have contributed to this report are ready, they're willing, and they're excited to be involved in our democratic decision-making process. They want to speak for themselves and represent themselves. This is why I feel so strongly about what the report represents and the youth voices in it tell us. This is also why today's launch event has been formatted in the way that you've seen it this afternoon, because young people have told us how they wanted to present it. Throughout this consultation process, in the drafting of this report, in building this event, and in every step of the way, our mission has been to empower young people. So if there is one thing I hope you leave with this afternoon after this presentation and after reading our report, I hope that it is the knowledge that children and youth are not tokens. They're equal actors, equal partners as we move forward to a more inclusive and equitable Canada. On this note, I move forward to place my gratitude to a number of individuals who hopefully are online with us today. First, thank you to our presenters and collaborators, the Honorable Langdon Pearson, who was the first to propose a federal advocate for children back in 2007, in the Senate report of the Human Rights Committee entitled Children, the Silent Citizens. Dr. Daniela Bendo, co-author of this report and assistant professor at Western University, King's College. Daniela has been an essential actor in drafting this report, in conceptualizing the study, and in the consultation process. We could not have done it without her. Simi Sahota and Megan Jacques, both youth leaders who have developed this report and are members of Children's First Canada's Young Canadians Parliament and Youth Advisory Council. A special thank you to Alexander Lichig, who is a co-author of this report, who spent many months co-leading the project on the ground with young people and has been instrumental in our success as well. And to Josh. Josh has been a key leader in conceptualizing the study and in making this happen and in guiding the process. I want to also thank Terence Hamilton, Policy Specialist at UNICEF Canada, Cheyenne Ratnam, co-founder and CEO of Ontario Children's Advancement Coalition, Sarah Austin and Stephanie Mitton of Children's First Canada. And also to Erwin Elmond, whose words, compelling words today, leave us with a lot to think about. Thank you, Erwin, who is fellow at the Special Advisor to the Laidlaw Foundation and another important partner for this report. And to Kelsey Beeson, a child and youth advocate who has been a great collaborator, also thank you. We collaborated with and partnered with UNICEF Canada, Children's First Canada, the Ontario Children's Advancement Coalition, the Elman, the Laidlaw Foundation, and the Pediatric Chairs of Canada. Thank you to my parliamentary colleagues who have attended today. To all the youth and children advocates who have been instrumental in moving the needle forward every day on child and youth rights in Canada. And thank you to the hundreds of young leaders who have come together to tell us why they think Canada needs a Commissioner for Children and Youth. This report could not exist without your dedication, commitment, and passion for moving Canada forward in turning the thoughts in this report into action. Following this event, the report will be available live on the website, and this event and the report will be available on my website and on the Senate of Canada website. A recording as well will also be shared online. My team will be sharing an email with these links with everyone who joined us today. And we'll also be distributing physical copies to parliamentarians, to youth participants, and to community advocates in the coming weeks. So please look forward to your copies in the mail. Thank you again for your time, everyone. Should you have any questions in the next couple of days, feel free, please, to reach out to my office via email. Happy reading to you all. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Thank you.
And with that, we end today's event. Thank you for joining us.